Hello, everyone. My name is Jimmy Smith, and welcome to episode number 13 of the Rambler Podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence, from highlighting the successes of our Prepinville alumni base, as well as highlighting the people who help make prep great for our students today. On this episode of the podcast, we are thrilled to have Veronica Seip as a guest on the podcast. Veronica started her pursuit for a career in education by attending Gannon University, where she studied secondary education social studies with a minor in political science and archaeology. She graduated with her bachelor's degree in 2004 and then later went on to pursue her master's degree in 2007 for curriculum and instruction. She also obtained her principal certification during that time. While as a student, Veronica was awarded the Most Outstanding Studies in Social Studies in 2004. She was awarded the Model United Nations recognition for her service as the Secretary General of the Gannon University Model Nations Program, as well as awarded first place for her history thesis presentation at the Pi Alpha Theta conference in 2004. Veronica began her career in education right out of college as an 8th grade teacher in Virginia for 2 years. She then returned back to Erie, where she worked as a substitute teacher, and then was hired at Iroquois Junior and Senior High as a social studies teacher from 2008 to 2018. During her time working in education, Veronica has been a secondary social studies teacher, assistant track and field coach, model UN advisor, junior class advisor, Iroquois Education Associate President, and Education Department adjunct instructor at Gannon University. She also currently belongs to the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development, the National Council for the Social Studies, and the National Association of Secondary Principals. Most recently, Veronica was hired with us at Villa in 2018 as the Assistant Vice President of Academics and Student Affairs, and that is where she currently serves in her position at Cathedral Prep. Veronica has been married to her husband Steve for a year and a half now and has 4 stepkids: Maddie, who is 22, Noah, who is 20, Isaac, who is 18, and Lily, who is 9. So we are very happy to have Veronica on the podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Jimmy.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure thing. So one of the things I love doing on the podcast is gathering, background information on my guests and being able to read a bio like that. It's one thing for people to see your name, as the title you serve here, but for people to get to know you a little bit more about your path to being here. A lot of great things in your academic pursuits and career. Did you always know you wanted to pursue education?
Well, I think I put in my bio that I played school, from the time I was probably in 2nd grade. And the stuffed animals, yes, were better students than my sister was, that's for sure. But there was a time where I thought I would maybe be an attorney.
Okay.
So I was sort of back and forth between teaching and law school, but had to pay the bills. So
right.
Just went into teaching right away after I graduated. But my 10th grade social studies teacher was a big influence on my deciding to be a teacher and to teach social studies, because he taught world history. So
that was one of the questions I had for you as well, then, with the focus on social studies all through your educational pursuits. Was there any influence outside of that teacher, or was he pretty much the main influence then for you on that decision?
I read a lot as a kid. That was before the days of Google and and YouTube, where you could just look anything up that you wanted to know about. Like, you had to go to the library and
what? You had to do that?
Yeah, it's crazy. And you rent, or borrow books. And I always loved reading about Egypt and also about hurricanes, tornadoes, a lot of dorky things. But
yeah.
So I always had that interest my whole life. I loved the History Channel growing up. So it just seemed kind of like a natural progression.
Yeah. So that's very cool that you got to go ahead and pursue that further in your studies. And then I'm sure probably easy teaching it because you're already passionate about it and share that with the students as well.
Well, it was interesting because my first year as a teacher in Virginia, I got to teach ancient world history.
Oh, wow.
One time.
Yeah.
It was 1 year, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then I ended up teaching American history for the bulk of my career, which wasn't really where my passion was, but I became more and more interested in it, as I developed my class and read a lot.
Right.
So it was kind of interesting how that happened.
Yeah.
That wasn't my primary focus.
But it ended up working out. Yeah.
Yeah, it ended up working out.
Yeah. So then you mentioned Virginia. You were down there for a couple years, and you come back to Erie, and you start working at Iroquois. You were there for a little while. What did you learn most during your time there?
I was thinking about this question a lot, and through my time as a track coach, I would say I learned a lot about teaching, which might sound like a weird thing to say, but I was lucky enough to work with a really experienced veteran teacher as a head track coach. He was actually retired when I started working at Iroquois.
Oh, wow.
He is still the head track coach, Craig Sluga, but he taught me so much about how to work with kids. And being a coach makes you think about teaching differently because, as a track coach too, you have to break everything down in small pieces. And, how to come out of running blocks, how to pass a baton, how to, all the different phases of a jumping event. And it makes you think about the fact that you have to do that in the classroom as well.
Right.
So I would say that I learned a lot there, but also as the union president at Iroquois.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, you learn a lot about people and how to work with people, but just about how to help people too, I would say.
Yeah. Well, especially in a position like you do today for prep, I'm sure that experience, like you said, learning how to deal with people, I mean, it's what you do all day now is dealing with people, whether it's students, parents, faculty, whatever it is. So it's a big responsibility that you take on each day for us, and it's great. No, that's awesome. So you had a great experience there, I assume then, and I'm sure you look back there with fond memories. And then, so how did you hear about the Villa job becoming open, and what made you decide to even pursue that position?
Will Patuch and I went to college together.
Okay.
So he called me when he knew that this position was open after he had taken the vice president position and asked me to come interview. So
yeah.
And at first I was like, okay, I wasn't really looking for an administrator position. So I just said, to my husband, well, I'll go check it out. And after the interview, I was like, he's going to ask me to do this. What am I going to do? So that's kind of how things fell into place there.
Yeah. So when you went back to think to yourself, what am I going to do, with this? What ultimately led to you deciding to then take that jump into the administrative role here with Villa?
I mean, I think there were a lot of pieces. I'd been teaching for 13 or 14 years at that point.
Yeah.
So sort of ready for a change or, something different. Although I do miss the classroom.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I bet.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
Especially over the past couple of years.
A little bit of change going on.
Yeah, a little bit of change in COVID.
Right. Yes.
But I was ready for a change, and I knew Will for a long time and thought it might be a good place to kind of start that part of my career as an administrator.
Yeah.
And here we are. Almost 5 years later. So it's been a great experience. It was a hard decision to leave Iroquois because, 10 years and the jobs that I did there, you make a lot of friends and families know you. And so it was a tough decision to leave, but time to kind of move on to something new.
Well, kudos to you to make that tough decision, right? It's easy to stay in one spot, especially when you do have all those relationships and families that you're working with. And I'll also say, good job to Will to get you over here, because I know you've done some really great stuff for us, and we're fortunate to have you.
Thank you.
So you worked for Villa for 2 or 3 years then, before it became Cathedral Prep.
Yeah, I was at on the Villa campus for 4 years.
4 years, okay.
Yep.
So what are some of your best memories then, looking back at your time at Villa?
I mean, I would say first and foremost, just, again, the relationships with the teachers and the families.
Yeah.
Has been great. Everyone was super welcoming to me when I started, which I didn't know, what that transition was going to be like.
Yeah.
So I was always super thankful for that. And just, I would say, I mean, a lot of the things that people say about Villa, right? All the traditions, things like Mary's Day, the different assemblies we would do.
Yeah.
When the girls won the state swimming title, I think that was my first year. That was fun because Sonia Whitman and I also went to college together. So, that was cool to be able to celebrate that with her.
Yeah.
So I would just say more in like the little moments.
Right.
But definitely some good relationships, have come out of that. So.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. I hear all the time about the Mary's Days and all the special things that the Villa alum got to participate in. So it's neat that you got a piece of that during your time there. So now as we carry those traditions on to prep, you're familiar with them and know what they're all about too. That's awesome. So your title, the Assistant Vice President of Academics and Student Affairs. What the heck does that mean, right? So people hear that and they're wondering, what do you do? What is your role here at our school?
Yeah, jokingly, we usually say that that's a really long way of saying that I'm an assistant principal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a real long, fancy title.
To be able to say, to summarize it as that.
Yeah. But, and I would say that, really at Villa, my primary responsibilities were, running the building day to day, dealing with discipline, attendance, all the things you usually associate with an assistant principal.
Yeah.
Moving into this year, the objective has been to shift my role a little bit more into faculty development, so professional development, and then working on academic programming, things of that nature. But just with the nature of the year and it being the first year that we were together on one campus, we've all been just basically doing everything we can.
Yeah.
It's been all hands on deck. So, which has been great because Rick and I work really well together.
Yeah.
We're on the same page, and, we've dealt with some of the discipline together, which has been nice because, when you're doing it by yourself, sometimes you kind of feel, not like we were doing it by ourselves before.
Right.
Everyone was always involved, but the day-to-day things, sometimes you kind of feel like you're on an island.
Yeah. What's a little bit easier, just walk down the hall now to talk to, Rick Herbstreit or Will Patuch versus you're all the way on the other campus, and Will might not always be there. He might have been over here at times, whether it was here or there. And I think, so Rick Herbstreit, he has the same title, and then he started the same year you did, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So you guys have been able to work pretty closely together, having come in at the same time, similar responsibilities on different campuses.
Right.
And now, like you said, rush of the school year, starting the merge, just all hands on deck, getting things going.
Well, and I mean, in the past 4 years, we really have worked closely together, to your point, even though we were on separate campuses. So it just felt like a natural melding.
Yeah.
To just be on the same campus together. So it's been good.
Yeah, that's great. Collaboration is always a good thing when you can work with each other on different areas or divide and conquer, whatever it is. So what are some of your favorite things that you do about your position today?
Some of my favorite things.
Well, favorite part of your job or what have you. I guess if any. No, I'm just kidding.
I am really enjoying the idea of working more with curriculum and professional development, because that's sort of where my passion lies.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely like working with students too, and I feel lucky that, in this role, I'll still be able to do that even, as things continue to shift. But curriculum is one of my favorite things. I know, again, I read about tornadoes as a kid, so I guess,
right.
A dorky pursuit. But especially the instructional piece, I think that I've just been doing a lot more reading. I've had a little more time to do that.
Yeah.
And reading about what it takes to be a good teacher and trying to, the reality is that we're in a position in America as a whole, but in Northwestern Pennsylvania, where we do have a teacher shortage.
Yeah.
And how do you make the most of and help develop the talents of the faculty that you have?
Right.
Is what I'm grappling with right now, I would say, in my mind.
Yeah. That is a big task. Approximately how many faculty members are on our campus?
63.
Yeah.
I think is the right number.
Yeah. So that's a lot of different personalities, teaching styles, people that you're dealing with to try to think through how to help everyone advance their ability to educate our students.
Right. When you're talking about different personalities, teaching styles, different subject areas.
Right. Yeah, that too.
And, I'm not an expert at teaching calculus, for example, far from it. So how do you help teachers develop in areas that you aren't an expert? And, how do you, it's a balance between trying to get everyone on the same page, but also give them the independence to be a professional and have the type of class that they want.
Yeah.
So that's...
Well, and I would say one thing that a lot of people ask me, as I'm dealing with alum or parents, and, how's the merger going, right? How's the merger going? That's the biggest question. And, you give, what I've heard is basically the students are doing well, teachers are doing well. But I think one of the things that I'm going to start to let people know is that through this merger process on the consolidation of resources, we can also devote administrators to certain areas that we haven't been able before. For example, you were sharing about how at Villa, you were doing so much of the day-to-day operations of running the building, but now you get to really focus on helping these teachers be better for our students, where before you couldn't really take that on because time and resources just wouldn't allow it. So that makes me really happy to hear that you've been able to spend a lot of time focusing on that.
100%. And that's what Will and I in particular have been excited for the past year and a half.
Yeah.
Knowing that, or at least hoping that eventually we would get to, we're not 100% there yet. I mean, there's still a lot going on, but to be able to, like you said earlier, divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Having those administrative resources all on one campus.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And like you said, we're also just got through Christmas break and this brand new school year. So there's going to be time to grow in these programs, and it's going to take some time to get a groove on things. But now I'm definitely confident in yourself and Rick and Will to, keep things going forward with the academic side of things here at Prep. So I know I mentioned in your bio, you've been involved in different volunteering opportunities and school functions. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about why you volunteered in school functions and why you think it's important to volunteer and be involved with the school side of things like that?
I think being in college, I was able to really dedicate a lot of time to that. In high school, I had to work a lot to help my family.
Yeah.
So I got to participate in those things at the college level. And I was involved in the Social Concerns Committee and did Model UN. And I created a service project at Blessed Sacrament when I student taught there. First of all, I'm passionate about helping people in general.
Yeah.
But then, through my career, it's also a way to interact with the community that you're in.
Yeah, very true.
So I've always taken those opportunities to be able to do that.
Well, and those are some of the things that make a school special, is when you do have people who are willing to volunteer, because really at the end of the day, what are we all here for is the kids and helping them in their studies, but it also goes extracurricular activities and whatever else they're involved in, and takes, people like ourselves to step up and volunteer, or parents to volunteer and say,
Right.
I want to help, support these kids and what it is that they want to do. And or maybe they don't even know why we're doing this, but we're volunteering. And years later, they might look back and be like, I'm so glad that
Right.
Mrs. Seip did that for us.
Well, and that's what giving the students the chance to have that opportunity too, like the Christmas dinner.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So, historically, I think Prep has hosted that Christmas dinner. I think it was 2 weeks before Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think it's changed a lot over the past couple of years. Again, you had COVID in there too.
Sure.
So, but, Emily Grenzy, Christy Martin and Ashley Junk did a great job coordinating with AVI, who actually made the dinners.
Oh, nice.
This year. And then we had leading up to the Christmas dinner, there was a drive for, hats, scarves,
Yeah.
Kids' toys, things like that. I mean, the amount of things that we had it was awesome to see that everyone pitched in and sent those things in.
Yeah.
Because everyone and that's what I mean, like the kids had an opportunity to see the people come in, who need those things.
Yeah.
And just some of the little kids that were there with their family and getting to pick out a toy. And, I think that our students really enjoyed themselves and got to feel good about helping people.
Right.
And that's what you want.
Well, and that's what makes an organization like ours very special, right? Is being able to, yes, we are excellent at our academics, we're excellent at our pursuit of athletics, but being able to do service projects like that too, where yes, you're volunteering, but we're also teaching the students about the importance of service to our neighbors and service to the community. I remember doing that as a student and how it benefited me, where it really opens your eyes to, there's a lot more people hurt or broken in the world than me and my little situation here. And
Right.
It really benefits you in the long term to be able to be a part of things like that.
Yeah, it's twofold. I mean, you hope that students take that drive to help people with them moving forward and participate in those things on their own, but then also give them an appreciation for the things that they have.
Totally. Absolutely. No, it's definitely something that benefits, like you said, both sides for sure. So as we wind down here on the podcast, just a couple more questions for you. You've had some really great accomplishments in your career, at least from reading your bio, and maybe you'd have a different answer than just what was read off, but what are you most proud of so far in terms of your career accomplishments?
I would say that, again, going back to the relationships.
Yeah.
As a teacher, your relationships with your students is super important. It's the center.
Yeah.
You can be the best teacher in the world, but having relationships with students has to be part of that in order for anything else to matter. And I think as an administrator, I've tried to, as much as I can, lead with that in mind.
Yeah.
And have relationships and form relationships with the faculty and staff. Because again, it's the same thing. To get to lead change, whether it be in a classroom or in a building, you have to have good relationships and connections.
Yeah.
So I would say that, I'm really proud of, because I take my work very seriously, and my husband might say too seriously sometimes. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with you 100%, in terms of relationships are just so important, to everything we do. I think back to some of the teachers that I had or administrators, and, one that comes to mind that, well, I didn't have her, but the stories I hear from alum is Mrs. Mullen. And the biggest thing is they don't ever talk about, oh yeah, she taught me this certain subject and I did great in college because she taught me this. It's always, man, that lady cared. I remember she got in my face and she made me work harder and she did this and that. At the end of the day, she just cared. And that's what I can tell having this conversation with you today is you just care so much about what you do, whether it's working with the students in your past, working with the students now today, or the faculty members or whatever have you. You just tell you care, and we appreciate that a lot. And like you said, the hard work you put in terms of things that you can be most proud of in terms of your accomplishments, be able to say relationships, it goes to a testament to who you are and why we're very fortunate to have you here. So last question for you. What are your hopes for how this school year ends up panning out as we kind of wind into, third and fourth quarter, get into this, end of winter and spring to end the school year?
Oh, man.
You're probably thinking, I'm not even thinking about the end of the school year yet. We're only in January.
Well, I think that it'll be fun to, again, as a consolidated entity, celebrate a lot of the end of year activities.
Right.
We kind of started that off last year by having sports day together at the event center. And that was a lot of fun. And so just to continue to see the progression of bringing all the kids together. But, I would, I guess, add to the answer that I gave a minute ago about things I'm proud of. I'm very proud of everyone and to be involved in the consolidation. I think it's gone really well.
Yeah.
It scares me to say that sometimes, like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop or something, but the kids have done really well. And that's the most important thing. And I think that they're enjoying it. And we're still working on things, but those things are going to fall into place, as we continue to work on them. But the students, I'm excited to see them celebrate all the end of the year things once we get through the spring.
Yeah. Right.
And I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Well, and that's a great point too. I think this end of the school year will feel a lot more like a celebration of this new Cathedral prep that, it's almost been tunnel vision for the last year and a half of just sprinting to the, through the consolidation, the merger, the construction project, getting into this new building, getting the school year going. That sometimes when you take a step back and you look at all that's been done so far, I feel like by the end of the school year, like you said, it's going to feel a lot more like a celebration of, wow, look what we did.
Right.
Look what we got done.
And to be honest, there haven't been a lot of opportunities to do that over the past couple of years. You had COVID that impacted the 2019-20 school year, and then 2021 was weird.
Yeah.
And then last year was kind of just overshadowed by the consolidation, and everyone worrying about that and thinking about that. And then you didn't really have a summer, at least we didn't anyway. And that was weird. And so, yes, to your point, by the time we get to the end of this school year, hopefully it feels like a celebration of everything that we've been able to accomplish.
Absolutely. I was going to say, man, if only Will could have laid out this for you, I don't know if you would have said yes to the job.
Believe me, it's been a topic of conversation.
Yeah.
So, yes, there's been a lot.
Yeah. No, just kudos again to yourself and Rick Herbstreit and Will Patuch and everybody, the faculty members, everyone on the administrative side of things that have helped the school go for the last 3-4 years. Like you said, really since COVID, it's been a lot. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think this end of the school year will feel like a big celebration. Be able to take a big breath at the end of the school year through the summer and prepare for next year. Now that we'll have everything.
Fingers
crossed, right?
Crossed.
Fingers crossed. No, absolutely. No, well, thank you so much, Veronica, for being a guest on the podcast. Really appreciate you sharing, everything from your background to, coming to work at Villa and now the things you do here at Cathedral Prep that makes us so great and the standard of excellence in our community and in the state of Pennsylvania. So no, thank you for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Rambler Podcast with Veronica Seip as a guest on this episode. It was great talking with Veronica about her role and how she serves our students at Cathedral Prep, and we just want to thank Veronica again for coming on as a guest on the podcast. So just a quick preview for the next episode of the Rambler Podcast, which will be coming out on Monday, February 6th. We are going to have a very, very special guest on the podcast. Mr. Tim Nicastro will be featured as a guest. Tim is a 1978 graduate of Cathedral Prep and is currently the president and CEO of Erie Insurance. So we're going to talk about Tim and his time at Prep, and then also get into some really great success principles, leadership, things that he's learned in his journey to get to where he is today. So you will not want to miss that episode of the podcast, again, coming out on February 6th. So thanks everyone for listening to this episode today. God bless and roll Ramblers.